Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, thanks for joining. Today I'm going to show you how to make one of our favorite dishes. It's called Chile Colorado. This is a Mexican stew with a rich red chili sauce, hence the name Colorado, which from Spanish to English translates to colored red. Usually it's served with chunks of beef or pork, but I've also made it using chicken thighs. So let's talk ingredients. Dried chili peppers are the star of the show for this dish, and they bring not only the flavor, but also give the stew its red color. I get our chilies from the local grocery store. We have an aisle with all types of herbs, spices, and seasonings. Chances are you're going to have to purchase the chilies in large quantities because that's how they're sold. They're dried so they'll keep, and you'll have them on hand when you feel the urge to make another batch of this delicious stew. Okay, so as you just saw, you'll need dried ancho chilies and dried guajillo chilies for the dish. You'll also need some sort of broth. I've used beef and chicken in the past. Then you'll need a small onion, some bay leaves, cilantro if you want to add it to the dish once you're at the table, and a jalapeno. Now you better believe I used a recipe for this dish, but it's actually a fusion of 3 different recipes, so I combined them all to develop the flavors to make the stew that we like. For our version of the stew, I used these seasonings: dried oregano, ground cumin, garlic powder, smoked paprika, and do you see those silver cubes on the right? When I don't have liquid broth, I use bouillon cubes as a backup. Now it's time for the fun part. Before you begin cooking and assembling your stew, you have to do a little work on those chilies. Step 1 is to remove the seeds. Usually the seeds is where the heat comes from with chilies. I'm not a fan of strong spice, so I do my best to remove all the seeds. To remove the seeds, you want to cut the stem portion off, pour out the ones that are loose, and open the chili up to get out the rest. Next, you'll want to rinse the chilies to get the last of the seeds out and any debris. I used cold water and the strainer that you see here, and just kind of worked the chilies around in the water, opened them up a little bit too, just to make sure they were clean. All right, the chilies are ready to be cooked. I have my broth in a saucepan on the stove, and I added the chilies. Once it starts boiling, I'll reduce the heat and then let the chili simmer for 20 minutes. You'll want to start working on other parts of your dish while the chilies are cooking, but please do not forget about them. And look at that. I worked so hard to get rid of all the seeds, and a couple of them still snuck through. While the chilies are simmering, it's time to prepare your veggies. So I diced the onion, and then I removed the seeds from the jalapeno, and I diced it too. it's on to the meat. You'll need 2.5 pounds of stew meat. We have a butcher box subscription, so this was a package of their beef tips. If the chunks are too big, feel free to cut them into smaller cubes. The seasoning on the meat is very simple. It's just salt and pepper. You want to season the meat on all sides with the salt and pepper. And you're going to brown the meat in oil, so next you'll need to cover it in flour. Again, you want to make sure that the meat is covered on all sides. Let's get ready to brown the meat. You'll need a large, deep pan on the stove and add some oil to it. The recipes say use about 3 tablespoons, but I like to add enough oil to cover the bottom of the pan. We have this Dutch oven here, and I love to use it for this dish. When the oil is ready, add the meat. The goal is to brown the cubes on all sides, but don't cook it. That'll happen later from the inside out when the meat is simmering in the stew. If your pot isn't large enough to have the meat in a single layer, meaning you don't have meat stacked on top of meat, then you want to brown your meat in batches. So put a few pieces in. As the pieces get browned, you want to take them out and set them aside on a plate and add more. But you'll see here that our pot's big enough. I don't have too much meat, so I'll actually be able to brown them all at once. Now it's time to saute the veggies. Add the onions and jalapeno in the same oil where the meat was browned. Keep stirring and cooking until they are soft and brown, and then you want to take the pot off the heat when you're done. By now, your chilies are done, so it's time to make the Colorado sauce. Pour the entire mixture of broth and chilies into a blender. Next, add the sauteed onions and jalapenos. Be sure to secure the lid on your blender and choose the liquefy option. Be very careful when blending and opening the lid because it's hot. You may see bits of the skin from the chilies in the sauce. That's okay because we're going to strain the liquid later. Going back to the deep pot, pour the beef cubes and any juices from them into it. I miss getting footage of the straining, so here's a clip from when I made this dish before using chicken thighs. So what you'll want to do is pour the chili mixture from the blender into the strainer. And you can use a spatula to rub the sauce around in the strainer to make sure you get all the liquid to coat your meat. Now it's time to add your seasonings. In terms of measurement, I have 2 teaspoons of dried oregano, 1.5 teaspoons of ground cumin, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, and 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika. After stirring everything together, don't forget to add your bay leaves. Bring the stew to a slow boil, then reduce the heat to low. You'll want to cover and simmer the stew for about an hour or at least until the meat is tender. And you can test the meat by poking a fork into it just to see if it easily slides off. Pro tip, to help thicken the stew, combine a mixture of flour and water or cornstarch and water. Stir it up really good until it's smooth with no lumps, and then pour small amounts of this mixture, which is called a slurry, into the stew and let it simmer. You'll notice that the bubbles will start to be thicker, which means your stew is getting thick, but you don't want to overdo it. And when it's time to serve, we like to serve our stew with rice. You can add some lime juice on top and cilantro to make a hearty meal, or grab some tortillas and make tacos. Thank you so much for watching, and let me know in the comments if you try out this dish and how it turned out for you.